All right, so first off, yay, slides are up. I like this topic. I like talking about things that necessarily aren't mainstream and normal, okay? So it's not like I'm trying to throw a wrench in here, but this is a SIEM that kind of is the backbone of all of this, but it's not a SIEM that like everybody uses on a normal basis. It's really tailored. It's very much, it's very custom. So, and it's very much deception. So active defense via a labyrinth of deception. First off, oh no, it didn't save. My transitions changed. I'm Nathanial Quist. I work at Logarithm, part of the labs team. I go by the really nice simple letter of Q. Now I could be bald, so it's a Q ball, or it could be a lot of different things. For me, it's like usually I get the same thing. It's like, you know, I say, hey, I'm Nathaniel, and people are like, no, Nathaniel, what is that? I'm like, oh, okay, Q. And they're like, Q? Okay. So it's like the same. I get the same response on Nathaniel or Q. I answer to both, so whatever you want to ask me on that. I'm a SANS master's student, so this this kind of concept came about when I was just kind of asking a couple different questions about how do I take two things that I absolutely love, which are honeypots and honey nets and things of that nature, and how do I take things like baselining dynamics within a normal network environment, and how do I make what is normally dynamic and moving all over the place in your environment, how do I actually make that something that you can monitor and see all those individual unique things that you normally get lost in the noise. So, a little bit about the agenda. I'm going to do just a quick kind of concept of what the labyrinth is. Talk about the location, something I call the Hall of Firewalls, which I actually really like. Baselining basics. I like this one, number 5. It's funny, there's a couple different ways to say SIM or SIEM. So I just think it's kind of fun to play on both those. You have a lot of, you know, SIM-spiration and it's simple and all this stuff, but I like SIEMs accurate. It's just kind of fun. Anyway, and then Billy say what, because I think hopefully I will try to blow your mind a little bit, which would be kind of fun. And then what's next, what this plan is. All right, so the concept. All right, so the labyrinth is like a lot of things, okay? It's a honeypot, but it's more than a honeypot. It's a group of honeypots, right? It is a honey net, all right? It has firewalls. In my concept, in my design here, I actually have 5 firewalls. So it's also a firewall and acts in those capabilities. But then it's also a stratified network, okay? So there's a lot of different things. The entire point of it is that I want it to be as flexible as possible. I want it to be as known as possible to you, but look as real, like a real network, to everybody else looking at it. Do you have a question? Okay. And the whole point is I'm trying to do what is like essentially like very difficult. I'm trying to make what is dynamic, it happens all the time and constantly changing in your environment, as static as possible. And you can't do that in a real environment, so how do I make a network static, right? All right, so that's kind of like my questions, and that's what I wanted to do. So right, the labyrinth is a constructed maze, right? So if we actually take what the labyrinth is from like the Greek philosophy and all that stuff, King Daedalus made this labyrinth in order for the Minotaur to get lost in so he doesn't kill all of his, you know, his citizens and all his people, all right? Then Theseus comes in and he is able to kill the Minotaur and all that stuff. I'm going to take the same concept and make the labyrinth like this real thing. It's like a real environment. It looks real, people get lost in it, but you don't know you're lost in it because you're just walking around, turning left and turning left and turning left, and then you're back where you started, sort of thing. So I'm taking that kind of concept, but I have to make it look as real as possible in a network environment. So what does a real network have? Well, it has systems, has users that do things, has processes, has network traffic that moves back and forth and calls out to the environment, trying to make it look as real as possible. We can do this on a system basis. Each system can have a script that is running that makes it look like normal users are doing activities, right? You can record normal traffic that you have in your environment, and you can kind of script that actions and make it look like it's real. So you can actually have a user connecting to Google doing a search. You can have a user connecting to a FIM or connecting to, you know, a file server, and it's actually, you know, pulling information down, moving traffic around. So if anybody's monitoring or looking at it, it looks like it's normal traffic, right? That's kind of the point. We can do that with Python. We can do that with PowerShell. I mean, Justin, wherever you went, I freaking love PowerShell. It's awesome. You can do that with bash scripts. And you do that by making like scheduled tasks, cron jobs. You can have them running on delayed timers. You can have a lot of different things to make it look as real as possible and have actions actually happen. The whole point is to make it look, did everybody see Blazing Saddles like forever ago, right? I love Blazing Saddles. Where you had the veneer city, you know, and people are like, you know, have the the arm, and they're just like waving out the window, and all the bad guys are like, it's a city, we're going to smash it. And, but then it's like a fake city, and they blow this whole thing up. It's not real. Okay, that's the labyrinth. Okay, that's what we're looking for. It's not just the deception. The veneer has to look as pretty as possible. All right, so inside my labyrinth, I have a number of things. Firewalls are in there. Obviously, I cannot emulate a real Cisco ASA. I can't put Junipers on there. I can't put Palos in there. But I can do other things, like everybody's heard of pfSense, right? We all know and love, the modularity of pfSense and everything like that. I'm using IPFire. And now I like IPFire because it's different than what everybody else. Oh, I would expect to see this, so I want to do something different. I want to stay on the outside, be a little bit more outside of everything. IPFire is great. You're looking for a firewall that has some sort of API connectivity. You're looking for something that can do things like IP tables, snort, things that are built in and modular open source. ViOS is also a really good one. I tested that. It does work pretty well. Obviously, I have Windows systems and Linux systems that are incorporated. I'm using services. I don't have Active Directory, but you should certainly have Active Directory. It keeps things looking real. Have those Kerberos tickets flying around. Web servers, email servers, file servers, everything that a normal system would have, you kind of have inside of it. Network stratification, DMZs, user farms, user sectors, and executives populate those with data that those people would normally have. If you're a company that does, like, say, financial data, you'd probably want to have Honey documents scattered around in there that look right. Like, here's a list of clients and all that stuff, something that you want people to be enticed to go see. All right. Now, this is the kind of beautiful part of the SIEM, is that there's actually a Minotaur running around inside of the SIEM, okay, and it's smashing people who are coming in. We're going to turn everybody into these little blobs of smashed, unhappy people. And that Minotaur is the SIEM. The SIEM is the holder. It is the Gandalf of the bridge. You will not pass sort of thing. It is monitoring everything. It is the decider of who is good and who is bad, because SIEMs are really good at knowing what you tell it to know. Right? It does exactly what you want it to do all the time, hopefully, right? If it works well. All right, so now we have the SIEM. Now let's talk about the location. Does everybody kind of have a sense? I know there's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of throwing out. I'm actually excited about this talk because everybody kind of knows SIEM, and when I've given this talk before, people are like, I don't know SIEM very well, so it's like I have to go through the whole process of talking about SIEM, so it's kind of fun in this spot. So let's talk about the place in where the labyrinth sits. The labyrinth needs to know everything, as much as everything coming in, and it needs to know as much as everything going out, so it has a clear view of what's happening, right? It's a real network, but you can think of the firewall stuff that's in between everything as like a natted environment where traffic is moving through, depending on how you look at it. I can go a little bit deeper into that in some aspects. But what I really want is, you can see over here on the right-hand side, you have the big bad internet. Then you have your gateway to the internet. You have your ISP provider. And you put the labyrinth right there, right after the end, right before your actual boundary. This is like one of the first things that you have. And now there's going to be this first line here. It says the labyrinth is first-ish in line. I understand that web servers obviously need to have a lot of unfettered traffic moving in and out, and sometimes that can be confusing, especially inside of a highly controlled environment like a labyrinth. So it can sit on the side. There's different architectures that can go with this, but this is the original concept. There are different ways that you can put the labyrinth. There's a lot of different things, but for my concept and for my theory, I want the labyrinth to be the first thing that anybody ever sees when they see your environment, right? Does that make sense so far? Everything? Okay. So let's do an explodo view of how the labyrinth looks inside. So inside of our labyrinth in the middle, we have our little network diagram here. So we're going to be moving in from the internet, coming from the right. We're going to go in through one. One goes into the labyrinth. Labyrinth goes through these different little firewall hops, different network segmentations, and then it goes back up through two and then back into your real firewall, and then into your environment. Okay. Inside the labyrinth, right behind the first firewall, you can see there that we have a guest network. We have probably a DMZ, like a fake DMZ, has a fake file server, has a fake a mail server, DNS, some things of that nature. Again, make it look kind of real. Again, if you have a large enterprise deployment, you're probably going to have your real DMZ outside of all of this. It's going to do its own real thing, not using labyrinth resources. Internal file servers, you have corporate users, you have executive users, you have IT farms, basically looking as real as possible. All of this feeds into that center top, and that center top is probably, that's our Minotaur, that's our SIEM, right? It has your collection, it's doing all the data store and everything of that nature. We have our analytics engine, kind of in the top rightish of that center top box. I'm looking for all the stuff that that we want it to look for specifically. So there's the architecture. I think it's still kind of a little bit unclear as to kind of how this is actually beneficial or useful. So I kind of want to talk about something that I call the Hall of Firewalls. And the Hall of Firewalls is, I always like to go back to a medieval castle, all right? And we have the castle, and you're looking at the castle, and you have all the defenses that has really high walls, you have a moat going around it, you have a drawbridge that comes down to get over the moat. But after the drawbridge, what do you have? You have a very large portcullis that slams down, does that. But then you have a hallway, and then you have another interior castle doors that hold it. And inside of the portcullis and those castle walls, what do you have? It's a hallway with arrow slits and a big hole on top to drop hot oil, do all these things that are bad, okay? During this time, you would have guards standing at the beginning, a couple in the middle, and one at the end. So if they saw something that looked bad or something interesting, they would use their big halberds and smash that rope, and the drawbridge or the portcullis would close, and then everything. Now, unfortunately, the guards inside, they signed up for this duty, but they probably are going to get killed because all the bad guys are now inside the portcullis, right? Which is kind of what happens, unfortunately. But the whole point is the guards are, well, these firewalls are acting like that guard, or those guards in between, okay? They're checkpoints, they're monitor stations, right? They are taking information in, and they're just kind of like, oh, yeah, I see you coming through. Yep, I see you coming through. That's cool. I'm going to send that to my SIEM. Oh, I see you coming through. That's great. Come up to my SIEM. And they're doing checks every single time, right? And all of that is just feeding us information on who's going through, who's monitoring, who's walking, who's doing stuff. And the whole point is I want the guards to be quiet. They're not saying anything. They're not confronting. They're not blocking. It's not their job. It's the SIEM, the Labyrinth's job to do that, right? To make that determination. All right? So the whole point is they're just monitoring. Now what we can do means the Labyrinth is actually a physical system, is that we can have taps on each one of these firewalls. A firewall is a cool thing because it's like a bottleneck, right? Everything has to go through it. So let's do a tap on that and send that information out to do a little deeper dive into something else behind it. So let's do some, kind of cut off at the top, sorry about that. But we have web proxy traffic being pulled out. So if you want to do some deep dive on your web proxies, that's pretty cool. If you want to pull out your email attachments and have those being analyzed by something else on the back end, that's great. Your deep dive, deep packet inspections for your IDS traffic, let's pull all that out. Let's save the resources from the Labyrinth and do some other things with that way and actually use those tools which we actually already use in a way where everything has to already go through it, but we can use it as a chain of events and then feed our SIEM on the inside, which is still helpful. So again, I'm still throwing a lot of things out at you. There's a lot of different little pieces that kind of go through this. But now I want to talk to you about the SIEM's powerful capabilities in all this. So we have all this data coming through. We're looking at all this stuff. Right now, it doesn't really look like anything special as far as a virtual environment or Honeypot. But what do we know about a golden image that we can have? Each one of the systems that we put inside of our Labyrinth, right, it is a solid golden image, right? We know everything on it. We know the scripts that we put on it to make a user look like a user. Right? We know the network traffic that is moving through to make that system do whatever that system is supposed to do. The golden image is just like we do in our normal environment, but the cool thing about the Labyrinth is that we're pre-populating our golden image to do everything that we want it to look like a normal traffic, like a normal user, a normal system on a standard production network. We're making it look as real as possible. We're golden imagizing everything. Is imagizing a word?
It is now.
Yes. So we're putting everything on that golden image to make it look. Every single process that's going to be used by every single user that'll touch that system, we're designing it all, right? I know what's going to be on there now. That gives me a couple really cool things. So if I took every single process, and I took every single user, and I took every single action that user did, how about if I turn every single one of those things that I put into a list? What do SIEMs do really, 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 really well? They use lists. And they compare things against lists. You can have, like, I'm going to take any SIEM. I'm going to try to be as SIEM-gnostic as I can. I'm going to use every single SIEM that I can use, even though I work for Logarithm, full disclosure. But we use SIEMs, right? So Logarithm has a thing where we have lists that if you just have the system, I know Splunk does the same thing. You can have 150, 200,000 items in a list of, like, say, a blacklist IP table or a watch list or something like that. It can still go through that. It might have a little bit high of a CPU value or might hit that a little hard at times. But you're using lists that are pretty large. SIEM's pretty capable of it. All you're doing is doing checks, right? So let's turn everything into a list. Let's turn service accounts. What service does that person use? What service does this particular user use at this specific time? What user usage, network usage, what HTTP requests that system uses, which ACMP that uses, which DNS servers we use. We're trying to do every single thing, map and list every single thing that a normal system does all the time. Now, we built it, right? We should know everything that it does. User agent strings, file names, paths, etc. So now we've populated our SIEM with a list of every single system on our Labyrinth, okay, that looks real. Now, what can we do with that? Now we're going to the power of the SIEM being able to detect some of these things, and this is going to seem hopefully accurate. This is a little bit overview of how a SIEM kind of works. I put this in here just in case no one really knows. But this is a slide that so I might kind of bust through this one a little quickly. I'll try to touch some of them. So when it comes to data collection, a SIEM is only as good as the data you give it, correct? I mean, it's not going to be very good if you give it kind of like half-parsed data, and it's not going to be very good if you only give it one type of data. You only give it firewall logs, you're not going to be able to see users doing anything, you know. So we have to have this breadth of knowledge that comes into our SIEM so we can get information. So I have a couple tips here. Some of my favorite thing to do when doing like SIEM deployments and things of that nature is get redundant log sources. You know, have the same type of data come from more than one log source if you can. Okay, let's take an example, like if you're going to search the web, okay, you're going to do a DNS request, so obviously we want DNS logs to see which domains we're going to. We want to have proxy logs as well to see, oh, what is that, you know, coming from a refer string, or is that coming, you know, am I going somewhere else? Okay, so it's like, okay, so now I have DNS, now I can have proxy logs. Maybe layer 7 firewall logs can also do that exact same way. If we want the same thing to come from multiple ways, if an adversary came in and was like, just did a rootkit on one of those things, you might not see it. So if we have another system that can see it coming from a different angle, you know, it's helpful, right? So you just want to be able to have redundant log sources. Don't be afraid of debug audit level. Your admins will be mad, but that's okay. Because we need that data. We need to have as much as we can, as high quality as we can, and we need to have it parsed out as far as we can. This is a hot topic, and I like talking about it because I like talking about hot topic buttons, but that is NetFlow. Not every SIEM is really good at bringing in NetFlow data. And even if it is really good at bringing in NetFlow data, is it actually doing the depth and metadata field collection and parsing of that data that can actually be useful for your environment? So maybe we don't need to have every single NetFlow packet coming through. We might just need to have a session. Okay? It really depends upon your deployment, your environment, all that stuff. But it's a question that you should ask. You know, you're only as good as the data you give, and you're only as good as the type and the quality of data that you're receiving. So, but when in doubt, collect it. See if you can use it in any way. Data processing, we all kind of know how it works. The log comes in, we parse it in some different way, give it some metadata fields, and then off we go. And we're looking pretty good. The cool thing, the really, really cool thing about the Labyrinth is that it's a finite amount. You know exactly what's coming into it. You're not pulling the entire environment in. You're pulling only like, say, 20, 30 systems, however many that you're making it look as like your front end as you can. So resources are low, which means you can start logging more things and you can process more things and more clearly and more fully. So that's pretty good. And we're only using baseline comparisons. So efficiency, as far as this SIEM's usage, is actually really low. We don't need a lot of extra modules. And then the cool thing is we actually don't need those advanced correlation models, right? We don't need to have histograms. We don't need to have statistical, rule lookups because we're only doing baseline comparisons. Now here's the cool thing, and I think this is the next phase of where SIEMs are actually moving into, and it's going to be an action script. Now every single SIEM worth being a SIEM in today's environment does something that can be scripted, right? Logarithm, we use smart responses. Radar, it uses action scripts. Splunk uses alert actions, and then Elk obviously uses Watcher and things of these natures. It has to be a way to say, when I see such and such pattern, like pattern X, I can do something Y, whatever that's, be a script, be it PowerShell, be it Python, be that, Fortran if you want to write Fortran, all that stuff. But this is what makes SIEMs in every sense, and this is really what makes the Labyrinth really, 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 really important, is because we're automation. We are automating processes that are moving. Okay, we know that anything that's entering our Labyrinth, since we created it all, and anything that happens inside of the Labyrinth that we don't know or we didn't put there, we know automatically that it's most likely or 100% nefarious. We didn't do it. No matter where it came from, we didn't design it to do that. Okay, so anything that's happening at all, any connection, any file that's being dropped, any network movement, any user action that we did not program is bad. So we want to automate that and like blacklist things and not be scared of it. So here's the power, right? The backbone of the Labyrinth is its ability to automate actions and to be able to see a pattern, write it to something, and do some sort of action behind it. In this example here, I have my home network. I was just looking at all the incoming IP addresses that were coming in. These three that are in red right here, I had never seen those before. Okay, the SIEM saw, hey, I saw Firewall 1 had these systems. I've never seen those before. I'm going to write those to a list. That's cool. Pretty simple. Now, Smart Response 2, or Action Script 2, or Script Action, whatever. Number 2 is, for every item in that list, write an IP table to block that and drop it from a firewall. I'm not going to drop it from the front firewall, though. I'm going to drop it from, means the Labyrinth is in front of everything. I'm going to drop it from my production environment. Okay, so whoever's still walking in the Labyrinth can move through and do whatever they want. And they don't even know that I've already seen them and I've already blocked them from my environment. I'm blocking them, why? Because they're not supposed to be there. I didn't design them to be there. There's somebody snooping around and doing something they probably didn't need to do, for whatever reason. So, means I have been able to take that information and I can put that into a firewall of my choice or move it to some sort of security system of my choice. I have now turned the Labyrinth and the SIEM into a sensor. It is now a sensor. It is now an intrusion protection system. It can actually block things from as soon as something happens to it. And I'm not scared of blacklisting it. I'm not scared at all because it's not supposed to be there. Does that make sense? Is that kind of cool? Yeah. I think that's neat. I think that's pretty awesome. Okay, here's the next thing, and this is what I was super, and this is like new content that I didn't have on the last time that I had this, is let's use the SIEM and let's use the Labyrinth with volatility. This is kind of cool. Let's turn volatility into a log source. Okay, so that's actually doing in the next phase. Okay, so let's say big bad actor here, he's coming in, he's moved into my Labyrinth and he's walking through doing his things. Okay, I already have his IP address, that's great, cool. All right, now, if let's say that user wants to start bringing things down into my environment, I can start, oh, now you're actually doing stuff to my environment, and I'm going to do another level of investigation and stuff on top of that. So let's see if I can turn my smart response or my action script and see if I can pull that memory and send that memory of that system that something happened to volatility and see what I can do with it. All right, so actor's connected to the system, which is good for him. Download, or her, I'm sorry, not to be sexist. So my daughter's a hockey player. She's a competitive hockey player, okay, and she's 12, so she moves through and we do a lot of travel. We've already been like playing hockey now for like a month and a half, 2 months. We've already had 4 tournaments already this year. It's insane. So people ask me, it's like, what do you do for fun? It's like, well, I do work, and then I do my master's stuff, and then when I'm not doing that, I go watch hockey, and that's pretty much all I do. It's kind of fun. But, all right, so, but she would be bad at me, so it's like, equality and stuff like that, because she loves pushing anybody into the board. It's kind of funny. So anyway, so actor is moving in. We already have their IP address, right? They started a process. So we have our 4688s, and we can see all that stuff. We already know that which processes are supposed to start, so let's compare all of our specific information against those lists. Now, we've already written that to a block list, so our firewall behind everything is already blocking everything. Now we actually have a new process that's running. Okay, now the SIEM, it's time to actually cause a memory dump, to evoke that memory dump from that system, pull that over to my volatility system, and then what do I do with volatility? I actually take volatility, and it actually now does a little bit of processing. I'll just dump that memory image into a system. It starts reading and recording, starts performing its specific operations. I'm going to do some volatility modules like connection scans, see if there's anything else coming through, some DLL dumps to see if there's any new DLLs that are coming through, mod dumps, net scans, socket connections, PS lists, PS trees, malfinds, timeliner, you name it. Let's turn those into actually log sources that we can bring back into our SIEM. Okay, now let's turn every single one of those into a list, right? So now we have a list, and we can take all this stuff, and it's moving through module output. Come on. It's going to the SIEM. Sorry about that. All right. So cool. So now that we have this comparison, we have our golden image across all these systems. We've already ran all these volatility modules against the golden image, so we know what's supposed to be in there. Now we know it's, what to compare against. Now we can find things like registry keys. We can find things like hash values. We can find things like new IP addresses that are moving through. It's like almost like behavioral analytics, but like a little bit of steroids. It's like you take behavioral analytics with deep dive analytics, and then you can, come up with something. And so it's still behavioral, but it's also kind of a deep dive, which is kind of cool. So now we can take all those things in the same way that we took the IP address and we moved it to our exterior firewall. Let's take all of those things and move them to, I don't know, anybody use Carbon Black? Anybody use Tanium? Anybody use SEP or Windows Endpoint Security? Take all of those new signatures that we have, like registry keys, stuff like that, and move those to those systems. Now we can start scanning the real system that we have, and if you start seeing these signatures, we know we have problems. And again, we've turned the SIEM into a pretty high-powered solution, right? So now Billy say, what? What did I just actually say? So the Labyrinth is able to augment security, right? It is not security itself. It cannot defend anything. So the Labyrinth does not replace, and it does not do anything other than detection and alerting. That's all it does. It cannot actually block things. Now, you can probably make your smart response say, instead of blocking your endpoint firewall, block one of the firewalls inside your Labyrinth and block some access moving through there. But really, the Labyrinth is all about detection. It's all it's really looking for, and giving you as much data about the information that shouldn't be there as you possibly, as much as it can. But cool. So what is but we're still talking about Honeypot technology and HoneyNet technology, right? So what is the best thing about Honeypot technology, for sandbox environments and things like that, is you infect it, and you infect it, and you infect it, and you infect it, and then you just reset it. And then you infect it again, and you infect it again, and infect it again, and you reset it. Okay, so the Labyrinth is that. You could reset the entire thing. Go back to the exact same template. Okay, so the cool thing is follow me with this one on a little bit, is that your actors moving through, and they're walking around, and they're doing their things, and dropping rootkits, and they're busting shells, and they're doing all the fun stuff. And you're detecting all that, and you're just watching them. That's all you're doing. It's just like, how far are you going to go? If you're going to go all the way through the Labyrinth, okay, I'm going to see how far you go, right? Now, you've gone too far, and posing a security risk to the actual real environment, let's say. Let's reset that. Now, everything that they just did is like, gone. And now, what is the actor going to do? Granted, now you've done two things. You've tipped your hand. Be like, I see you. Now you know they're there. And so they're going to, who knows what they're going to do? Are they going to re-attack you? If they are going to re-attack you, are they going to use the exact same thing that they did before? Okay, or are they going to do something different? Okay, now if they do something different, that's kind of cool. I mean, now I know a little bit more of your tool set. I know a little bit more about what the actors are doing. I know a little bit more about methodology of how important you think my environment is, and then you want to keep re-attacking it over and over and over again. So this is developing threat intel. So did the Labyrinth just become a threat intel sensor? That's kind of interesting. I mean, you're getting IOCs, you're getting all this stuff coming out of it. So that's kind of cool. Now, but if you really want to change their mind, which is like something kind of fun, if they keep coming back and keep coming back, why don't you just take the entire same network and then just give it a whole new layout? Just completely change everything. And they'll be like, huh? Oh, exactly. You can change everything about the whole thing, right? The whole point of it is to be as flexible and manipulable and modifiable as you can, but to also make it static, but still look real. Question?
What do you think about using, I was thinking about this, using it for things like guest Wi-Fi and even as sort of a NAC layer.
Yep.
You can set it up and so that you tell your contractors, connect to guest Wi-Fi, go here, get your VDI, do your thing.
Yep.
So you'll notice anybody who's not going directly to their VDI starts to poke around.
Yep.
You're out of the pool.
Exactly, great point. So the question is, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit because it goes into the location aspect. Where do you put it? Can you put it in a wireless access point? Can you actually use it as a kind of a NAC interface? Can you use it as a VPN interface? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do with it, and a lot of different places to put it. All right, but does it sound cool so far? I think it sounds pretty awesome. Question? Okay, so I've been very careful to leave it SIEM-agnostic, right? So I am not, it is not related to logarithm. Okay, so I'm not bringing anything in. This is actually just sitting in my basement, just running. That's what, it's my own project. Yeah. But it can. It can.
So I'm curious,
Correct.
Are they all truths? And if they weren't, would you get my contact?
Will you share your
Yes.
IP address with us?
So that's the cool thing is I've actually given my IP address to a couple of different people, you know, good friends. Anybody know Greg Foss? He works at Logarithm as well, so I've talked to a couple people. Give him my IP address, and I learned a lot of stuff about what Greg can do, for one, which is scary, and then just kind of like how movement happens in my environment. So it's still in the environment. Go ahead.
Are you sharing some of those templates? Are you thinking of putting that on somewhere where we can share it, or how you orchestrate all of that? I mean, I know, for instance, like Modern Honeypot network and some kind of ways in which you can deploy all of this. And since we're talking about automation, how would you do that?
So, yeah, good question. There is a lot that goes behind all of this, and I would love to give, this is still a high-level topic. It's like high-level, but still deep. It's like one of my favorite conversations where it's like I'm diving deep into a topic, but then I'm staying as high-level and broad as I can to bring as many people with me to do this. So yes, templates, things of that nature. Right now I only have one template, and I can certainly share that with you. I do not have a slide to share everybody right now how it works. There is a template of this within the paper that I have. It is SANS InfoSec Reading Room. I was the first person to put a paper in the active defense category. Oh, that was awesome. Yay. So, I do want to address that. So talk with me off topic or out of this, and I would love to rap about this for a long time, because I can rap. All right, so what's next? Now, I found a really bad flaw, especially, thank you. I found a really bad issue, I call it an issue, with my hypervisor that I'm using as I put volatility in this environment. VMware allows you to snapshot and pull an image of memory from a snapshot, correct? It's kind of a cool thing. And volatility is really cool in that it already has a plugin to pull all that information out, and then you can actually do volatility information on VMware memory images. Zen Server does not do that. So that sucks. The only way to actually pull a memory image is I have to configure each individual system to when it crashes, it dumps all of its memory to a file. And then I have to collect that file once that system has reloaded, which sucks, and it's a time delay. And then I lose a lot of different stuff of what the actor was going to do. Right? So that sucks. Horrible, horrible, horrible. So do I stay with Zen Server? Do I go with VMware? VMware has to have a license. You have to pay for it, and then I don't want to do that. Defeats the purpose. Exactly. So that's one issue. The next issue is any super stealthy Red Hats. I know Jake took off, but any super stealthy Red Hats that can walk into an environment and they're sitting on a system and be like, this is a honeypot. I'm going to back away slowly. Sorry. So it's like, so I need to find a way to confuse things. So if there are tells, so like MAC addresses, 005056 is a VMware's MAC address. If you have any of that, it's a VMware, okay? You can change that, so that's something you can do. Registry API calls, CPU characteristics, all that sort of stuff. That is something that needs to change. A big thing that I put on here, and I'm just going to skip the next three because I'm running out of time, is that I need to make this small. Right now it's sitting at 24 gigs. It's really hard for me to distribute to everybody. So the thing that I'm trying to do is make it as small as I can. My goal is to fit it onto a QCOM box, tiny little boxes that you can buy, little 4-core, 8-core little system with 4 gigs, 8 gigs of RAM. I'm trying to put everything onto that, and that way you just download an ISO and you can use it in your own home environment and do whatever you want with it. That's the goal. We'll get there. And then that's it. So that's kind of the conclusion. That's what we went over. I'm going to put up my question slide, and I'm going to go for questions. And then here's my contact information. Q. There's 3 ways to do Q. So those are it. That's me.